Hello everyone, my name is Anne-Marie Kane and this is The Brain and the Nervous System for Psychology 101 Intro to Psychology. Today our learning objectives are to be able to name various parts of the nervous system and their functions, to be able to explain how neurons communicate with each other, identify the location and function of the limbic system, and articulate how the primary motor cortex is an example of brain region specialization, and to be able to name how at least 3 neuroimaging techniques and describe how they work. First, we have the central nervous system, which is made up of the brain and the spinal cord, the portion of the nervous system that is encased in bone. The central nervous system is primarily in charge of sensory information. It sends signals to the peripheral nervous system and communicates through nerve cells in the brain called neurons. Next, we have parts of a neuron. First, we have the dendrites, which are the input to the neuron, and they are the little arms that surround the soma. The soma, also known as the cell body, is surrounded by dendrites and connects to the axon hillock. The axon hillock creates the electrical impulse called action potential. The axon is the part that extends away from the soma and splits into multiple little parts that connect with other neurons. Next, we have the myelin sheath, which is the fatty layer around the axon that speeds up the action potential. Action potential is the electrical signal sent down the axon when the threshold of excitation is reached. Then we have the presynaptic terminal, where the electrical signal is turned into a chemical signal by neurotransmitters to communicate with other cells. Lastly, we have the node of Ranvier, which is the gaps in the myelin sheath on the axon. Now, how do neurons communicate? When action potential reaches the end of an axon, neurotransmitters are released. Neurotransmitters are chemical signals released by the presynaptic terminal to a postsynaptic neuron. Neurotransmitters are then taken up by receptors in a process called reuptake. Next, we have the brain. The brain is made up of many different structures and parts and split into many different sections, like the forebrain, hindbrain, and midbrain on the right side of the screen, or the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe on the lower left. The forebrain. The forebrain is in charge of receiving and processing sensory information, controlling motor functions, thinking, language, and perceiving. The cerebral cortex is the outermost layer of the brain. It processes sensory information, controls voluntary movements, thinking, memory, and decision-making. Next, in the yellow, we have the cingulate gyrus, which is in charge of behavior regulation and emotional processing. Lastly, we have the corpus callosum, which connects the right and left hemispheres. Then we have the limbic system. The limbic system has structures in all of the regions of the brain, but it is most commonly identified as part of the forebrain. The limbic system is responsible for emotional regulation and behavior. It's made up of the hypothalamus, which helps manage functions like body temperature, hunger, thirst, sex drive, and sleep. The thalamus, which relays all motor and sensory information from the body to the brain, except for smells. The amygdala, which controls emotional responses and memory, and is most commonly known as the fear center, and the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain responsible for memory and learning. The primary motor cortex is a strip of the frontal lobe that is fully dedicated to voluntary movements. Each part of the strip has a body part that it controls. As you can see on the left-hand side, each body part has a different amount of space on the primary motor cortex. Each finger has about the same amount as one whole leg. The lips and the parts of the body used for vocalization have the most space on the strip. The peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system carries necessary signals for the body to survive. It connects the central nervous system to the other parts of the body. It is made up of the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. It controls both voluntary and involuntary actions. The somatic nervous system The somatic nervous system links the brain and the spinal cord to the skeletal muscles under conscious control. It is responsible for sensory receptors in the skin, for all senses except vision. Then we have the autonomic nervous system, which is split into the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems. The sympathetic nervous system is the body processes that help in time of need, fight or flight system. For example, heart rate increases, pupils dilate, and digestion is slowed or stopped. The parasympathetic nervous system reverses the work of the sympathetic nervous system. Like the heart rate decreases and digestion resumes as normal. Then we have the neuroimaging techniques. First, we have the PET scan, which is the positron emission tomography. Then we have fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. Then, lastly, we have the EEG, which is the electroencephalography scan. For the PET scan, a radioactive substance is injected into the bloodstream. This allows for observation of how much a person uses parts of the brain while not performing a task. Unfortunately, though, this has poor temporal resolution, which means it's not precise regarding when brain activity actually occurs. Then we have the fMRI, which measures changes in naturally occurring oxygen in the brain. For when a region of the brain is active, it requires more oxygen. This scan also has low temporal resolution. Then lastly, we have the EEG, which measures electrical activity in the brain. Electrodes are placed in various positions on the scalp. It has poor spatial resolution, which means the location of brain activity is not very precise. Thank you so much for watching, and I really have enjoyed this class. I hope everyone enjoys their day. Have a good one.